Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has reaffirmed that direct talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin remain the most effective path forward, as he emphasized Ukraine's continued fight for freedom, while its call for peace are ignored. In a defiant Independence Day address to the nation, looking ahead to the post-war period, Zelensky stated that the presence of foreign troops in Ukraine will be important.
The issue on the ground, the presence, as they say, boots on the ground, is important to us. It is too early to talk about this. First, the infrastructure will be prepared. And of course, the Ukrainian army plays an important role in this infrastructure.
Also, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, who was in Kyiv for the commemorations, said Ukraine's security guarantees are not the choice of Russia.
We are working through with our allies in the Coalition of the Willing and with Ukraine the modalities of those security guarantees on land, in the air, and the sea, and I would not exclude the presence of troops.
Amid this, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov told NBC that Putin and US President Donald Trump had discussed the issue of security guarantees for Ukraine, and that Putin had raised the issue of the failed Istanbul discussions of 2023. At those discussions, Moscow and Kyiv discussed Ukraine's permanent neutrality in return for security guarantees from the 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council. Lavrov said the countries will be guaranteeing the security, which he underlined must be neutral, non-aligned with any military bloc, and non-nuclear. He made it clear that NATO membership for Ukraine was unacceptable for Russia.
President Putin and President Trump
and the guarantors would be guaranteeing the security of Ukraine, which must be neutral, which must be non-aligned with any military bloc, and which must be non-nuclear.
During negotiations.
Commenting on Ukraine's leadership, Lavrov said the Kremlin views Zelensky as a de facto head of the regime, but not a legitimate leader of Ukraine. This while adding that the Kremlin will not accept Zelensky's signature on legal documents establishing terms for an end to the war. He also accused the Western countries of trying to block peace negotiations to the war after a flurry of diplomatic efforts appeared to stall.
They're just looking for an excuse to block negotiations and want it to be seen not as their fault or Zelensky's, who is also being obstinate, setting conditions and demanding an immediate meeting with Putin at all costs.
Amid this, US Vice President J.D. Vance has come out in support of Russia, saying the country is making significant concessions to Trump for the first time in more than 3 years of conflict.
They've actually been willing to be flexible on some of their core demands. They've talked about what would be necessary to end the war. Of course, they haven't been completely there yet, or the war would be over, but we're engaging in this diplomatic process in good faith.
Vance cited the U.S. administration's belief that Ukraine's security guarantees and territorial issues will be a key factor in reaching a peace deal. His remarks came as tensions remain high on the battlefield. On Sunday, the Kremlin said Ukraine had attacked Russian power and energy facilities, blaming drone attacks for a fire at a nuclear power plant in Kursk. The Ukraine government's Center for Countering Disinformation says it had been reported that the shooting down of a drone allegedly caused the fire, and blamed Russia for spreading manipulations and misinformation. There were no injuries and the fire was extinguished. Also on Sunday, Russia and Ukraine both confirmed a prisoner swap had taken place, with 146 soldiers on each side being exchanged. Russia's defense ministry also said 8 people from Russia's Kursk, which was partially occupied by Ukraine for several months, had been handed over and would return home. Zelensky said those returned by Russia included soldiers, border guards, and civilians, most of whom had been in captivity since 2022. He also said journalist Dmytro Kilyuk, who was kidnapped in the Kyiv region at the start of the war, was also coming home.